I never thought a simple weekend stay could turn into the most confusing chapter of my life. I just wanted a break, a quiet escape from the mess my heart had become. After my breakup, everything felt dull, meaningless. When my best friend Emily invited me to stay at her house for a few days, I said yes without thinking twice. I needed warmth, laughter, and something that didn't remind me of what I had lost. Emily's house had always been that place, a haven filled with light and noise, a family that loved freely. The moment I walked in, the scent of fresh pancakes and coffee wrapped around me like a hug. Her mom greeted me with a smile, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Emily pulled me upstairs, already chatting about plans for the weekend, about movies, late night talks, and her mom's special breakfast the next morning. I smiled, nodding, letting her chatter fill the quiet spaces inside me that had been too heavy lately. Then he appeared. Ethan, Emily's older brother. I'd met him briefly before, years ago, when he was still in college, but this time was different. He was older now, calmer, with a presence that filled the room without trying. He gave a small smile when Emily introduced us again. "Hey, nice to see you after so long," he said, voice deep, steady. I smiled back, trying not to notice how he looked at me, not in a bold or flirtatious way, but with curiosity, as if he was trying to remember who I had become. We exchanged polite words at first, how university was going, how life had been since we last met. His tone was kind, and I found myself relaxing in his company more easily than I expected. When I dropped my bag awkwardly near the hallway, he bent to pick it up without hesitation. "You can take the guest room next to mine," he said, and for a brief second, our eyes met. There was something in his gaze, warmth, maybe recognition that I couldn't quite name. Dinner that night was easy, familiar. Emily did most of the talking while Ethan stayed quiet, listening, occasionally making dry comments that made everyone laugh. I noticed how attentive he was, not in a loud way, but in how he remembered small things, like how I preferred my tea without sugar or how I hesitated before answering certain questions. He noticed details that made me feel seen in a way that startled me. Later that night, when everyone went to bed, I sat by the window of the guest room, watching the soft rain tapping against the glass. The air smelled like wet grass and comfort. I should have been content, but something inside me stirred, a strange mix of calm and restlessness. I told myself it was just exhaustion, that my mind was searching for distraction. But when I heard Ethan's door open across the hall, I froze for no reason. Footsteps, quiet, then silence. The next morning, he offered me coffee before anyone else was awake. "You look like you didn't sleep much," he said softly. His tone wasn't teasing, just observant. I laughed it off, taking the mug from his hand. "Just couldn't stop thinking," I admitted. "About what?" he asked. "Everything," I said, looking away. He nodded, like he understood without needing details. As the days passed, small moments started to stand out. The way his voice softened when he spoke to me, how he held the door a little longer than necessary, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. None of it was wrong, at least not yet. But there was something there, fragile and dangerous, like a flame in a room filled with air too dry to be safe. I told myself not to read into it, that it was just kindness, that Ethan was being polite. But the more we talked, the more I realized I looked forward to hearing his voice. I noticed when he wasn't around. When Emily would run errands or step out, silence would fall, and in that silence, I became aware of how my heart reacted to his presence. One afternoon, Emily went to meet a friend, and I stayed behind, claiming I was tired. Ethan was in the living room, laptop open, focused. I sat across from him, pretending to scroll on my phone. "You can play music if you want," he said. "I don't mind background noise." I smiled, playing something soft, wordless. It filled the space between us gently. After a while, he closed his laptop and looked at me. "You okay?" he asked. I hesitated before nodding. "Yeah," I said, but my voice was barely above a whisper. "Just thinking again." His eyes held mine for a few seconds too long, and I looked away, heart pounding for reasons I didn't want to admit. The air felt heavier suddenly, and I told myself to breathe. When Emily came back, the spell broke, and everything went back to normal, or at least it looked that way. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying that moment. The look in his eyes, the way my pulse had raced like it hadn't in months. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something more dangerous: attention, care, temptation disguised as comfort. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew something had shifted, and I had no idea that what started as a quiet weekend getaway would soon unravel everything. I thought I understood about loyalty, friendship, and the kind of love that burns even when you know it shouldn't. The next morning began with laughter in the kitchen, but beneath the noise, something in me had changed. I caught myself glancing toward Ethan without meaning to, noticing how easily he moved through the house, how quietly confident he was. It was ridiculous, I told myself. He was Emily's brother. He was off limits in every possible way. Yet the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it grew, the awareness of his presence. The weight of unsaid things between us. Emily left for her shift at work, leaving me and Ethan alone. I stayed in the living room with a book I wasn't really reading. He was at the table, working, typing quietly. Every few minutes, I could feel his eyes flick up just for a second before returning to his screen. The air felt thick, like we both sensed the same thing, but were too cautious to name it. He broke the silence first. "You're quiet today," he said. "Just thinking," I replied. "You do that a lot?" There was no judgment in his tone, just curiosity. I smiled faintly. "Maybe too much." Later that afternoon, he made coffee and handed me a mug without asking how I liked it. He remembered from before. That small gesture shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. It made me feel like he was paying attention, like I mattered in ways that went beyond politeness. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, eyes steady. "You seem better," he said. "Compared to when you arrived?" I nodded. "I am, I think." He tilted his head slightly. "You don't sound convinced." I laughed softly, staring at the steam rising from my cup. "Maybe I'm just learning how to pretend better." His expression softened. "You don't have to pretend here." That single line lodged itself somewhere inside me. It was dangerous, gentle, but dangerous. From that moment, our conversations deepened. We talked about failed relationships, about loneliness, about how easy it is to lose yourself trying to make someone else happy. He listened without interrupting, without trying to fix anything. That silence, that steady presence, did more for me than any comforting words could. I hadn't realized how much I missed being understood. Days passed like this, filled with harmless interactions that didn't feel harmless at all. Every shared smile, every casual touch when passing a plate, every time our hands brushed by accident, it all built into something unspoken. I started to feel guilty for noticing. I would catch myself glancing at him and then immediately look away, pretending to check my phone. Sometimes I thought I saw the same hesitation in him, a flicker of restraint he was trying hard to hold on to. One evening, it rained hard, and Emily had gone out again. The storm knocked out the power for a moment, and the house went dark except for the faint light from the window. I laughed nervously, holding my phone's flashlight, and Ethan appeared with candles, calm as always. "Guess we're going old-fashioned tonight," he said with a quiet smile. We sat at the kitchen table, the flickering light between us, listening to the rain. It should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It was charged, heavy with everything we weren't saying, He asked me about my ex, why it ended, if I missed him. I hesitated. He made me feel invisible, I said finally. Like I was always reaching, but never enough. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. Then he didn't deserve you. I wanted to thank him, but the words caught in my throat. My heart beat faster than it should have, and I hated that it felt so easy, so natural to be near him. That night, I lay awake, listening to the rain, trying to quiet the noise inside my head. I knew it was wrong to think of him this way. Emily had trusted me, opened her home to me. Ethan hadn't done anything inappropriate. Not really, but something invisible had already begun. The lines were blurring, and I didn't know how to stop it. The next day, I told myself to pull back. I kept conversations short, avoided being alone with him. But somehow, it only made the tension stronger. It was as if the silence between us had a pulse of its own, beating quietly beneath the surface. When I laughed at something he said, it felt too intimate. When his hand brushed mine by accident, I pulled away too quickly, and that reaction said more than words ever could. Later that evening, Emily was upstairs on a call, and I was in the living room again. Ethan walked in, holding 2 cups of tea. "Truce," he said with a half smile, like he could sense my attempt to distance myself. I hesitated before taking it. "You don't give up easily," I murmured. "Not when I care," he said, his tone low but certain. My breath caught, and I didn't know what to say. We sat there in silence, the kind that feels too full. I could hear Emily laughing faintly upstairs. The contrast made everything sharper. The warmth of his voice, the tension in the air, the realization that something irreversible was about to begin, even if neither of us wanted it to. When I finally went to bed, I told myself it was just kindness, that he was being friendly, that I was imagining the rest. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple anymore. Something had shifted beyond control. And when I heard a quiet knock at my door later that night, I didn't move at first. I just sat there, heart racing, caught between fear and longing. I should have ignored it. I should have done the right thing. But curiosity, emotion, and loneliness have a way of drowning reason. That soft knock echoed again, and in that fragile moment, I realized I was standing at the edge of a line I could never uncross. When I opened the door, the hallway was dim, and Ethan stood there, silent, unsure, the same conflict mirrored in his eyes that I felt tearing through me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "I couldn't sleep." My voice came out small, unsteady. "Me neither." The air between us felt charged, as if every thought we'd tried to bury had found its way to the surface. He stepped closer, not enough to cross a boundary, but enough for me to feel the warmth of his presence. My mind screamed at me to stop whatever was about to happen, but my heart refused to listen. He said my name softly, like a secret, and I felt something in me give way. There was no plan, no decision, just a pull too strong to fight. When his hand brushed mine, it wasn't forceful or bold, just careful, like he was asking for permission. I should have said something, should have walked away, but instead, I stayed. I told myself it was only a moment, a mistake that wouldn't mean anything, but when his lips found mine, every lie I'd been telling myself disappeared. It wasn't passion, not the reckless kind I'd known before. It was quiet, aching, desperate, as if 2 broken people had finally found a reflection of their pain in each other. It was warmth and confusion all tangled together. And for a fleeting second, I believed it was right, that maybe the world would forgive us for this one small, selfish act. But the truth of what we were doing pressed down hard the moment it ended. We pulled apart, breathless, shaken. He whispered, "We shouldn't have," and I nodded because I knew he was right. Yet when he reached to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, my heart betrayed me again. The next morning was unbearable. The sunlight felt too bright, the air too thin. Emily chatted happily over breakfast, completely unaware. Every word she spoke was a reminder of what I had done, what I had stolen from her without meaning to. Ethan barely looked up from his plate. The silence between us screamed louder than any confession could. My hands trembled when I reached for my coffee. Emily didn't notice, but I could feel Ethan's eyes flicker toward me, guilt written all over his face. When she left the room, he finally spoke in a low voice. "We need to forget last night." I forced a nod. "Of course," I said, even though the memory was already carved into me like a wound that wouldn't heal. He left soon after, saying he had errands to run. I watched him go, feeling hollow, the weight of what we'd done sinking deeper with every minute. I wanted to believe it was a mistake born from loneliness, not desire, but that didn't make it easier to live with. The hours that followed were suffocating. Every sound in the house made me flinch. When Emily returned, smiling and carefree, I wanted to tell her everything, to beg for forgiveness before she found out some other way. But I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat, tangled with fear and shame. I told myself silence was kinder, but deep down, I knew it was cowardice. That night, I found Ethan outside, sitting alone, staring into the dark. He looked different, drained, distant. "We can't undo it," I said quietly. He nodded without looking at me. "No, but we can try not to hurt her more." His voice was tight, almost breaking. "She trusts you," he added, and that single sentence hit harder than any accusation could. I wanted to tell him it wasn't just my fault, that he had been there too, but the truth was, I'd let it happen. We both had. Days passed in uneasy silence. We avoided being alone, careful not to let anything show. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves. One afternoon, Emily's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, then looked at me strangely. "Did you and Ethan stay up late the other night?" My heart stopped. "Just talked," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "He mentioned something about that," she murmured, but her tone was different now, curious, uncertain. I laughed it off, but my hands were cold. That evening, the tension finally snapped. Emily came into my room, her eyes red. "Tell me the truth," she said. My throat closed. "About what?" I asked, but my voice trembled. She held up Ethan's hoodie, the one I had accidentally left on my chair. "You've been lying to me." There was no point denying it. My silence was enough. Her face went pale, then angry, then broken. "How could you?" she whispered, stepping back like she didn't recognize me. "You were supposed to be my friend." I wanted to explain, to tell her it wasn't planned, that I never meant to hurt her, but every word sounded hollow in my head. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but she shook her head. "Sorry doesn't fix betrayal." Her voice cracked, and that sound will haunt me forever. She left the room, and a few moments later, I heard her door slam. Ethan came in after, guilt written all over him. "She knows," I said, and he nodded slowly. "I told her it was my fault," he said quietly. "But she's hurt, and she has every right to be." His voice was calm, but his eyes looked deeded. I didn't know what to say. We had crossed a line that couldn't be erased, and now the cost of that one night was staring us in the face. The house felt different after that, emptier, colder. Emily avoided me completely, and Ethan left the next morning without saying goodbye. As I stood in the doorway, watching his car disappear, I realized how quickly something that felt like connection could turn into destruction. What began as comfort had turned into chaos, and I was left holding the ruins. That night, I packed my bags in silence. I thought about the warmth of that first day, how innocent everything had seemed, and how it had all unraveled. I wanted to hate him or myself or both, but all I felt was exhaustion. Love had never been the problem. It was what we did in its name that shattered everything. When I finally closed the door behind me, I knew I wasn't just leaving Emily's house. I was leaving behind a version of myself I could never return to. The house felt hollow after everything collapsed. Emily stopped answering my messages, and I didn't blame her. I left before sunrise, carrying only my bag and the kind of regret that doesn't fade with time. The air outside felt heavy, like it knew what I'd done. I kept walking, not sure where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there another second. My heart felt split between shame and something quieter, a strange longing for the simplicity that had existed before I crossed that line. The first few days back home were unbearable. I couldn't sleep without seeing Emily's face, that look of disbelief when she realized what I had done. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice asking, "How could you?" The words were played endlessly, carving deeper into me than any insult ever could. Ethan didn't reach out, and I didn't expect him to. What could either of us say that would make it right? We both knew we'd built something fragile out of broken pieces, and it shattered the moment it touched reality. I deleted his number, but sometimes I'd catch myself staring at my phone, waiting for a message that would never come. The silence between us became a reminder of everything we ruined. For weeks, I lived quietly, almost mechanically. Work, eat, pretend. The world kept moving like nothing had changed, but inside, everything had. I wasn't angry at him or even at myself anymore. I was just tired of carrying the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. Months passed, and life slowly began to find its rhythm again. I met new people, filled my time with distractions, but guilt has a way of staying in the corners of your mind. Sometimes I'd hear someone laugh the way Emily used to, and it would stop me cold. Sometimes I'd dream of Ethan, not in a romantic way, but as a ghost of what might have been if things had stayed innocent. Love wasn't the lesson I took from that experience. It was the understanding of how quickly comfort can disguise itself as connection. How easily two lost souls can mistake loneliness for love. Eventually, I stopped running from what happened and started facing it. I wrote everything down, the friendship, the laughter, the mistake, the aftermath. Seeing it on paper made it real, and for the first time, I didn't look at myself as a villain or a victim. I was simply human, flawed, and desperate for something that made me feel alive again. That realization hurt, but it also freed me. The story wasn't about Ethan anymore, or even Emily. It was about me learning how easily the heart can deceive when it's desperate for warmth. One day, I saw Emily again by accident. It had been almost a year. She was with friends, laughing, radiant as always. I froze, unsure if I should walk away, but she noticed me before I could decide. For a moment, her smile faltered, then returned, softer, smaller. I managed to whisper her name, but the words stuck. She nodded politely, a quiet acknowledgement, and that was it. No conversation, no confrontation, just a small nod that said everything. Forgiveness wasn't there, but maybe one day it would be. I didn't expect it. I just felt grateful she looked at me at all. After that, I stopped holding on to the guilt so tightly. It didn't erase what I'd done, but it allowed me to grow from it. I learned that apologies don't always bring healing, that sometimes the only way to move forward is to accept the consequences and carry them with grace. I had to forgive myself, not to excuse my actions, but to make peace with the person I was then, the one who acted out of pain. Instead of reason, Ethan eventually moved to another city. I heard from mutual friends that he rarely spoke of that time either. Maybe he carried his own guilt. Maybe he found peace faster than I did. Either way, I no longer needed to know. Some chapters aren't meant to be reopened. They exist as reminders, quiet scars of who we were and how far we've come since. When I think back to that weekend, it feels like a lifetime ago. I remember the warmth of that home, the laughter, the quiet storm that followed. I don't see it as a love story anymore. It was a story about boundaries, about how fragile trust can be and how easy it is to lose yourself when you confuse empathy with affection. It taught me that love without honesty becomes destruction, and comfort taken at the cost of someone else's trust is never worth it. Sometimes at night, I still wonder what might have happened if I had just stayed in my room that night, if I had chosen silence instead of the knock at the door. But I don't dwell on it for long. The past doesn't change, no matter how much we wish it could. What matters is who we become after the damage is done. I've learned that forgiveness is not about hearing the words, "It's okay." It's about living better afterward, making sure the hurt you caused doesn't repeat itself. Emily may never forgive me, and that's her right. But I've learned to forgive the version of myself who didn't know better. She was lost, searching for something to fill an emptiness that love couldn't fix. Now, I find peace in small things, a quiet morning, a clear conscience, the knowledge that I've changed. I no longer seek love as escape, but as truth, the kind that doesn't hurt others to exist. What happened at Emily's house will always be a part of my story, but it no longer defines me. I went there to heal from heartbreak and ended up breaking something far more precious. I lost a friend, a part of myself, and an illusion of what love was supposed to be. But through that loss, I learned that love without integrity is nothing more than longing dressed as comfort. Some mistakes destroy, but others rebuild. And from the pieces of that broken trust, I built something stronger, a promise to never again confuse being wanted with being whole.